Okay, thanks, Ines. Yeah, MRB now, but usually when we say we're from MRB, we then have to explain it. It's McFarlane Rural Business anyway. About 18 months ago, I guess we started looking at developing a farm system model or analysis, and really, if you want an analogy, it was, I guess, a little bit similar to the dairy farm system model that the dairy industry has in terms of the level 1 to 5. Some of you may be familiar with that. And I guess if you want an analogy, that's as close as we've got. Obviously different in a lot of ways. So I'll just go through where we are to date. So it looks a bit different than it did on mine. So basically, the idea of it is to compare the productive and financial performance between, I've said, hypothetical breeding and finishing farm systems. Okay, so what we have is we've looked at farm systems based on we've called it intensity of finishing or feeding, I should say, and intensity of breeding or differences in breeding. Okay, and we've done that for breeding farms and for finishing farms. Now today I'm just going to talk about the finishing project because that's taken up or been the focus to date. All right, so the idea is to provide insight to farmers of what potential benefits and differences exist between the farm systems, provide a catalyst for farmers to analyse and review their own farm systems, and provide a base to benchmark actual farm performance against using common metrics that we've used in this modelling. It's not a farm management tool, so it's not something we're rolling out to farms to replace FarmX or anything like that. It's really a conceptual farm system model. All right. If you also think you've all seen the growth curves, okay, so this is probably an extension of that in some degree as well. Okay, so in terms of the model, this is just an outlay of the finishing part. So if I put the whole slide up on the screen, there'd be a breeding part on top of this. So you can see across the top, we've got different breed types. So on the left, we've got a moderate red, if you like, with a moderate stag across it. The second column is larger framed hind with high EBV stag across, and then the third one is once again the moderate red hind, but with a terminal sire such as a Wapiti. Okay, so those are your three breed types. And down the side, we've got different intensities of feeding. So we've got a slow finishing system. So this is all, and I'll show it on the next slide, but around the type of feed and the growth rates, etc. I guess a middle range one in terms of average finishing, number 2, and the fast finish system. Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry about the slides, I'm not sure what's happened here. So just in terms of, so what we've had to do, between the systems, what we've tried to do is look at what the variation and variable costs are between the system. And most of that is related to the feed production and the feed intake. Okay, so when we're looking at the feed intake, we're looking at the regrassing and fodder program in terms of what's the cost of regrassing, what's the cost of growing fodder beet, etc. What's the fertiliser cost, how much supplement is fed, so like the cost of making silage, how much feed is imported, and also what is the annual production, average annual production in that rotation. For example, if we've got a 7-year rotation of ryegrass to kale, etc., we say the ryegrass is growing at let's say 10 tonne per hectare per year, kale's at 12, and that'll give us a weighted average for that 7-year rotation period. Okay, so that gives us our what we're calling our variable cost of feed production. Okay, and then we have to look at how much the animal's consuming in the growth pattern that they've been given, if you like, in the model. Okay, so that then gives you your total cost of feed that the animal consumes, which is the total amount of feed they're consumed by the cost of feed. And this one is going to be, oh no, that has come out all right. Okay. So those are the three systems that have been modelled. Okay, So you've got finishing 1, we've said it's a 10-year rotation. Sorry, there's a 10-year rotation. Finishing system 2 is 7, and the very intensive one is 5 years, okay? And so the next one down is the feed use. So if we just skip to finishing 3, what we're saying there, we've got 1 year in fodder beet, we've got 2 years in a clover and herb mix, and then we're oversowing with 2 years of a short rotation. So that's your 5 years. If you go back to system 1, it's pretty much a grass-to-grass system renewing every 10 years, so really low intensity. You can see there that we've got the total feed supplied per year on average, so running from 7.5 tonnes under the all-grass system to just under 15 tonne under the combination of fodder beet and short rotation grass and herbs and clover. Okay, we've made some assumptions on fertiliser input, which drives the cost of the feed. We've got the amount of silage per head that's being fed out. There is a line there for imported feed, there is no imported feed in this model, but some farmers use imported feed, such as barley. And that then drives the relative feed cost, or the comparative feed cost between systems, being the 3.13 cents per kg of dry matter up to 7.28 cents per kg of dry matter in the very intensive system. Okay, and then we've also put in the average ME level and the feed utilisation, which then also which drives the feed intake of those animals in the feed production side, or feed consumption side, I should say. Hello. Right. Okay. So I'm not sure what's happened there, but this is just some outputs that have just some slides now, some outputs that have dropped out of the model. So if we're looking at all right, I'm missing a few slides here. Okay, we'll go with what we've got. Okay, so I did have the days to finishing and growth rates, but they've seemed to have jumped out of here for some reason. So basically, if we looked at the days to finishing, so that's the length of time from the weaning date, which is set at 1 March, through to the average slaughter date. So the very slow finishing, which is 1MF. So 1MF stands for moderate framed red, okay, and finished under a system 1 feeding system. And that's basically budgeted on being there pretty much 12 months. Okay, the very fast finishing ones are only there for about 220 odd days. Okay, and that slide's missing there, sorry, and so is the growth rate slide as well. So this is the carcass weight produced per hectare that the model drops out. So you can see that the various lowest ones is about 193, and right up to the far one here, the finish. Sorry, and these slides are terrible, but the finish 3 on the very right-hand side with the large frame or terminal fawn is up towards 800 to 900 kgs of carcass weight per hectare. Okay, so that's in terms of kgs of carcass per hectare. Now, bearing in mind that's an annualised result, because the ones on the right are only there for 220 odd days. Okay, so we've annualised that out to be comparative across all those. Sorry, I'm not sure what's happened here, but yeah, sorry, all the output slides are missing. I guess the best I can do is just talk to it. So what we have done is, I'll just skip back to the blank one for now. We have drilled it right down to return per hectare, okay, or you might call a net margin per hectare, and they range. Sorry, I've just got to get my glasses out to see this thing. So they're ranging from about $1,100 per hectare up to $2,300 between the lower finishing system with the moderate red up to the system 3 with the hybrid or the large frame red. Okay, so quite a significant difference in the return per hectare. As say, going from about just over $1,000 per hectare up to over 2,500. All right. So as I say, I had about 5 or 6 slides here. Unfortunately, you haven't been able to see. But so what we then did was we road tested it. So we went out around 7 farms, 8 different systems, because one farm had 2 different systems on it. Okay, so 3 in the North Island and 5 in the South Island. And what we did was we went through their feed production cycle. So what was their rotation on farm? Some of them used quite a bit of imported supplement. Some were growing fodder beet, some were mainly grass, etc. So we tried to calculate how much feed they produce per year on average over that rotation, whether it be a 5-year rotation or a 7-year rotation, and also what the cost of growing that was. So obviously we asked them how much it costs to grow the fodder beet, what were their annual inputs into their feed production system. Okay, so we drew all that, and let's just hope the other slides are working. So that's good. So essentially, this is where we got to here. So on the right are the 3 finishing systems, okay, and the feed production that we saw previously in the presentation. So about 7,500 in finishing 1, 7,500 kgs of dry matter per year in system 1, and about just under 15,000 in system 3. Okay, the blue lines are the 8 farms or 8 systems that we went and road tested, and you can see they fell in those categories. And actually, when we matched them up and said, well, are they similar in what we're doing to the model systems, we weren't too far out. Obviously, we can't make one system to fit all, but actually I was quite happy where it all fitted. Okay. What I've done is just taken that same graph and I've overlaid that with the actual feed cost. Okay, so that wasn't quite as uniform, I suppose. So once again, on the right-hand side with the red lines, those are the feed costs running from that 3.13 on the system 1, finishing 1, up to 7.28, I think it was, on system 3. Okay, that's cents per kg of dry matter variable cost in growing that feed. Okay, and you can see the range of feed costs that we had across the other farms, and that was really determined by obviously the intensity of their finishing system, but how much imported feed they used, how much supplement they made, and in some instances how much of the ag work they did themselves, and how much nitrogen they used in the grass phase. Okay. All right, now here's the net margins per hectare that we measured on those places, or we ran through. Okay, so you can see right at the bottom was about 1,150, and that system there actually almost mirrored the system 1 moderate frame, maybe verging to a system 2 of a moderate frame red. If we go right up the far side, so we're getting the very intense farm 8, and once again that did almost replicate system 3 with a large frame or terminal. Okay, and the returns or the margin per hectare is in the same ballpark. Okay, so quite satisfying that actually we were road tested. It wasn't miles away. All right. So what I've done to just show that is this the same graph with the blue lines, the ones we road tested. On the right are the results out of the model. Okay, so system 1 MF, so that's finishing 1, low intensity finishing with a moderate frame red, 1169, and you can see, as I said, down the bottom end of that graph, we're at 1151. Coming all the way up to the system 3 with a large frame or terminal, we're at 2,300, give or take, and we're about 2,500 to 6. Okay, so we're in the same realms. The main reason those 2, 7 and 8 exceeded the model was the cost of feed production was lower. They had probably slightly less inputs, but they also did probably the ag work. Their cost of growing fodder beet was lower. Maybe the yields of fodder beet were higher than what we had in the model. Okay, so I guess the road testing was quite beneficial. It would be good to do a little bit more. it's not an easy thing to do because, as I said, this is not a farm management tool. It's not a FarmX, so it does take a little bit of manipulating the data when we put it in there. Okay. But I guess I think that's my last slide. Yep. So I guess from here is really the project is all about stimulating people to analyse what they're doing, and you know, and if we have people going away from here today and saying, well, where I sit on that grid, then we've achieved what we set it to do. All right. Sorry about the presentation. I'm not quite sure what went wrong there.
I don't quite know what happened there.
Threw me off a bit. Yeah.
Jamie is going to have to scoot away after this, so we can take perhaps 1 or 2 questions before he does. Edmund, you got your hand up first. And Jim.
Thank you, Jamie. Have you or will you incorporate a nitrogen use for the different models in today's environment? It's important to have an understanding of that.
Yep. So the model has got a nitrogen use component in it that you put in. So between the models. No, we haven't. We could run that metric out if we could run that out because it's just the number of kgs of nitrogen we put in, and we can put it against any of the other metrics, whether it's per hectare or per kg of carcass produced. Yep.
I think it needs to be there as an indicator as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you. And Jim.
Can you work that out on sense of kgs of dry matter consumed on that top model?
Yep. So we've done that, and as I say, there's a whole lot of metrics that sit in here that we obviously can't roll out today. And interestingly enough, the return per kg of dry matter isn't that much difference across all 5 systems. One of the real key drivers is actually the amount of feed produced per hectare. Okay, and the reason for that being is that obviously that higher intensive system, the cost of producing that feed is higher. Okay. And that sort of, I guess, dampens down the return per k of dry matter. But when you're producing close to 15 tonne instead of 7.5 tonne per hectare, if you've got the same return per kg of dry matter, then obviously return per hectare is going to be a lot higher.
And your levels of the ME, the higher the ME, the higher the growth rates, isn't it?
Yeah, and I guess that's probably reflected more because we set the growth rates. It's actually reflected more on that the consumption comes down. And so if you put the ME up, or make it a better ME feed, then obviously the consumption required to hit that growth rate will come down.
All right. Thank you very much. That wasn't fair, Jim. You asked 2 questions. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Okay.
I think, please.